All right, hello everyone. Welcome to chapter 7. So chapter 7 is going to be on political violence. This is a really fun chapter for me to talk about. I enjoy having these conversations in political science. I think most of you guys are actually interested in this like specific topic in general as well. Obviously, there's a lot of examples of political violence that we can reference all around the world. It exists both in democratic and non-democratic regimes. Okay. Obviously, the key concepts that we're going to look at, though, is obviously what political violence is. We'll look at the different explanations for it. Obviously, you have an assignment that you will go and describe what you think is actually the best explanation for political violence existing. We'll look at revolutions. Okay. Obviously, your textbook likes to reference the American Revolution, so that's something that gets discussed. And then terrorism, there's a lot of examples that we can look at, both examples that have happened within the United States and then also outside, which we may have played a role in. But the last couple things we'll look at is state responses to security and liberty. We'll talk about surveillance once again. I'll give you guys a really good story about a close friend of mine. And then we will talk about religion and political violence as well, because this is one of the key factors as to why this actually happens in the first place. Now, historical context, okay? Your textbook goes over some very good examples, okay? So, like assassinations that occurred due to anarchists. So, if you look at that bottom right there example, okay, this is a Russian Tsar Alexander II, Empress Elizabeth, the Austria-French President Carnot, and then U.S. President William McKinney. Obviously, everyone likes to highlight 9/11 here in America. It gets brought up every single year. One of the first major terrorist attacks, actually, though, in America is actually the Oklahoma City bombings. If you guys haven't looked that up, you guys should. Very interesting. I've actually come across there's a high school teacher in Mendota, California. Her name is Kittner. She was actually investigated by the government because she predicted that this attack would happen. So she wrote a paper. She said, I think an attack's going to happen in America. And if it happens, it's going to happen in one of these cities. It happened. They investigated her for it. So really cool story. If you guys ever come across this lady, she's a teacher at Mendota High School. But some other examples, though, obviously in 1919, we have the mail bombs, 1920, the Wall Street bombing, and then the state response, we see the Palmer raids, at least here in America, okay? Um, Now, what is political violence? Okay, it emerges when there's a weakness that is found within the state monopoly of violence. Okay, so sovereignty ends up eroding, and violence becomes pervasive. Okay, now political violence sits between war, crime, and contentious politics. Okay, now, and obviously here's from a protest here in America. So why political violence happens? The three examples or major explanations of this is institutional. Structures encourage or constrain the behavior. Now they can encourage political violence to take place because they're encouraging us to go out and attack maybe a neighboring country, okay? Or maybe a neighboring country doesn't like what we were promoting within our institutions and they attack us. Political violence within regime can happen because people finally have enough of being constrained and their freedom is restricted and they want to fight back. Okay. Now, ideational is ideas justify violence. Okay. And these ideas can be irrational at times. Um, but we'll discuss that later. And then individual is just personal motivations. People commit these crimes because there is either something mentally wrong with them or they are acting out on their values. Okay, so there's something that they strongly stand by. They feel that they cannot do enough by politically participating, so they actually choose to head towards violence. Okay, I think this is actually a big reason as to why we see assassinations take place. Okay. Now, not all assassinations. Some of those assassinations, there's some outside forces playing a role. Okay. Now, institutional explanations. Okay. When you have a winner take all system, it leads to marginalization. Okay. People feel that their participation is blocked, so violence becomes logical. They're like, you know what? If me participating in this election isn't going to make any change, I think I need to do more. We need to protest. Okay. And we've seen this in America plenty times, whether it was, Black Lives Matter protests, which some of you guys referenced in the assignment, or even people storming the Capitol on January 6th. Okay. It sounds crazy. And I'm not saying that those are the exact same thing, but those are reasons as to why people decided, you know what we're doing is just not enough participating. We are going to become violent now in order for our opinions to be heard. Right now, there's a very good example of violence going around. People are ripping flock cameras down, and they need to keep doing it. Okay, there is no reason why our government needs to keep going and getting more intel on us. Oh, it's for national security. What are they doing with that information? They already listen to us all the time, 24/7. And what more do you need? Okay. And obviously, 1984 is something that is supposed to be some, it is made up fiction, like a Black Mirror episode. No, it is becoming reality. Our government is trying to stalk us in every single aspect of our lives. As of right now, they're listening. Obviously, this will get posted, but as of right now, my cell phone's listening. There's a speaker in this TV up here that's listening. Okay, we wouldn't know that if it wasn't courtesy to Edward Snowden. We'll talk about him later in the chapter, but it is ridiculous that we do have to actually stem towards violence. It seems for our government to actually listen to us, and obviously for the quick write for that you guys are having next week, it is about merging our um, um, government or military capacity with Israel. Is that something that's good? And it just seems that we're getting to the point where violence is going to have to be the answer. Almost like we need another protest. We need a revolution. So, um, but yeah. Now, ideational explanations are ideas matter. They provide a worldwide view. We're trying to diagnose problems and it justifies violence. Okay. Sometimes most of the times, this is going to be like religious fundamentalism, struggling again, like I did on the last video. Radical and reactionary attitudes. Now, a lot of the times when you guys see these terrorist groups like Al Qaeda or ISIS, they usually are coming from some type of religious background, but they are extremists. Okay, so I don't want you guys to justify as what they're doing as okay. They are just sitting on an extreme side of it. Okay, now individual explanations. Okay, there's psychological, humiliation, desperation, liberation. Okay, the other is going to be strategic. You can use violence as a rational tool. Violence can be used to sway an election. Okay, so like there was protests in Japan earlier this year, and they elected a new prime minister almost within the span of a week. Okay, we've seen a prime minister in the last year with a bunch of protests and looting going on, and prime minister gets elected through Discord. And it's funny, but that is a strategic tool. Now, psychological, it can be humiliation. This is, well, if you want to consider the United Healthcare CEO being assassinated as psychological, if you're going to consider that Luigi kid a terrorist or not, it's whatever. But these are the two approaches, okay? And here's a video that this is my personal video when I actually go visit 9/11 myself, or at least the memorial beacons out there. Crazy, about a month later after I went to this, someone actually jumped in there to make a political statement, okay? I want to say he was a former service member. He was protesting the war in the Middle East. Why are we still there in the first place, okay? But once again, the biggest one that we like to highlight, we like to hit it every single year. Not saying it's not important. Obviously, there's a lot of conspiracies around what actually happened with 9/11, but there's a lot of other examples we can look at besides this. Okay, so I'm not gonna keep sitting right here looking at this. Okay, now comparing explanations. Okay, now when it comes to free will, institutional is very low, ideational is medium, and then obviously individual is high. Okay, because you're choosing to commit it. Now universality, institutional usually leads to particularistic, individual leads to universal, and ideational leads to mixed. Okay, now the Basque region. Okay, this is actually a very good example that hits all three different types of reasons as to why political violence exists. So you guys don't know what the Basque region is. It is a small region between France and Spain. They don't claim either. Okay. Little fun fact, this is something I found out in the last year, okay? Because I like to tell people that I'm just Mexican. I am actually Basque as well through my dad's side actually. So I guess maybe the reason why I like political violence is because maybe like, I'm inherently a terrorist. Okay, and I'm don't mean that seriously, but um, now there was there was repression under authoritarian rule. The Basque region wanted to fight for their own freedom. Now ideational, there was fear of cultural extermination. A really good. I thought this was a very good way to reference them. The Basque region is very similar to what we're seeing in Palestine. Okay, they are trying to have a very similar movement to carve out their own region. Okay, um, and obviously political violence is stemming in that area. Okay, and then obviously individual, there was youth mobilization. There was the Kel Baraka, which was a terrorist organization, which actually fueled a lot of this political violence. Okay, now revolution. Okay, obviously this is public seizure of a state. It is key to overturn government regime. Public participation, state takeover, regime transformation. We all know all about this. This is what the American, okay, revolution was based off of. Okay, now not all revolutions can be violent. Okay, you can look at Eastern Europe in 1989 and South Africa. Okay, there's a transition that your textbook likes to highlight. Okay, now, shifting views in revolution. Okay, there's a couple different phases. There's phases that we've gone to kind of describe what we think is the reason as to why political violence exists. When it was pre-World War One, we said it was descriptive and unsystematic. After in phase two, in the 1950s and 60s, we started to believe that it's modernization. There's some type of disruption, and it's leading to these revolutions. Okay, now in phase three, it is actually the explanation is going to be Skocpol's. Okay, so data Skocpol's um, state-centered model. Okay, and it meant that state weakness led to international pressure. So that is how we kind of view it 1930s to current. Okay, or my fault, 1930s, 1970s. Okay. Now, relative deprivation model. There's a couple examples for textbook gifts. Iran in 1979, Egypt in 2011. Okay, and there's a gap between expectations and reality. Okay. Now, once again, here is data Scotpool. Okay, revolutions require this type of model. Revolutions require international competition. Okay, state reforms which lead to resistance, political paralysis. So there's an opening for revolution. There's some type of standstill. People don't really agree with. They don't really agree with a political leader, whatever it is. But some critiques of this, it underplays the ideas and underplays that those leaders actually don't hold a monopoly over that type of violence to exist. Okay, it's hard to falsify. Now, revolutions 1989, the Arab Spring. I'm actually not really going to spend too much time talking about this because a lot of you guys actually wrote about this, and it seems like you guys read this part of the chapter, so no need for me to cover it. Okay. Now, terrorism defined. Okay. It is defined as non-state violence targeting civilians. Okay. Often tied to revolutionary goals, small groups lead a large political impact. ISIS, Al Qaeda, the Boko Haram, the list goes on. Okay. And there's others which have caused severe harm, loss of life, and human rights violation. I always like to look at terrorism like this. If we're by U.S. definition of law, you were committing violence while trying to coerce the population or make a political statement. Okay, if that is not existed, it is just normal crime. I would say it depends though. There's some loopholes on depending on how violent the crime is. You know the scope of it, but that is how we should define it. I also don't want you guys to get domestic terrorism confused with this. Now, domestic terrorists, at least here in America, we like to classify like mass shooters as domestic terrorists. Okay. Now, I would say they are mass murderers. Okay. Now, they are terrorists if they're doing it with political intent or they're trying to coerce or evoke fear into a population. Okay. So it has to have some type of political impact if we're going to define it as terrorism. Obviously, when it occurs from an outside group attacking another country, that is going to be international terrorism. Okay. Now, state-sponsored terrorism. This is the United States special right here. We love doing this. We love going into other countries and fueling these groups or these terrorist organizations, propping them up. Like Osama bin Laden was a CIA asset. You know, we don't have to go too far. We were over here trying to control Saddam Hussein for like every time you look in history, the United States, this is what they love to do. If those of you who watched Narcos in Colombia, we were giving money and military supplies to the FARC. because we wanted them to spread democracy. Okay, so the United States treats this like how we treat Helldivers too. We're trying to spread democracy everywhere. We want a military base everywhere. So we're gonna go around and we might sponsor some of this terrorism. Okay, so we're gonna target civilians. We're gonna play a role in assassinations, maybe kidnapping a president in the middle of the night, and then supporting these proxy militant groups. And usually these groups are actually maybe like experts in guerrilla warfare, which we'll talk about. Okay, but state terrorism blurs the lines between repression, war, and human rights violations. Okay, it's really, these are like almost, I like to call, they're almost like proxy wars that the United States like to prop up. Okay, now one thing that I will highlight, and I just to be aware, I'm not getting paid $6,000 to give you guys this information, but I actually think an excellent example of state-sponsored terrorism is the case with Hezbollah and these exploding pagers. Okay, and I will give the Israeli government props here because once again, this takes a lot of time, dedication, and intel. Okay, if you guys are unaware of this, okay, I would search up the story, but I'll give you a little summed up version of it. Hezbollah was a terrorist group. Okay, and they all were pretty much all eliminated within one day. Okay, so the Israeli government found out that they were talking through walkie-talkies and pagers. They bought the company, rigged the company with explosives, and set all the explosions off at once. I think this is very interesting. I think it is very cool. Is it a human rights violation? Is it inhumane? Yes, but it is very effective and it shows us an example of state-sponsored terrorism. Once again, I did not get paid 6,000, but if you want to go ahead and wire me that check, go for it. I'll take the casino and I'll put it all on black. Actually, I'll probably put it on red. Now, once again, state-sponsored terrorism. Okay, this could just be a coincidence. That I'm not trying to move that out the way. My fault. Okay. Um, but in Mexico, in their past election, okay, where we see our first female president within the country actually take position, okay, there's 38 politicians killed within the year. Okay. I think it was at 41 was the final count. Now, a lot of them were local politicians. Okay. And I'm not saying political violence doesn't exist in Mexico prior to this, but it was just very strange that a lot of these people were publicly speaking out against her. Okay. Actually, this image on the right was an image that she tried to get scrubbed or said that people would be punished for posting and spreading it everywhere because she looks like a witch in it. Okay. Also, probably just a coincidence, but if you can't tell by the nose, she comes from a specific group of people. Could just be a coincidence, just like Argentina's president. But I don't know. I'm just connecting dots that don't matter. No one's gonna view this anyways, besides my classes. So, guerrilla warfare. So this is when non-state actors targeting the state. Small mobile units, hit and run tactics, rural, urban insurgencies. Difference from terrorism. Guerrillas target state actors, and terrorists target civilians. Okay, so they're gonna be targeting like politicians. So you could probably use this as an example. Okay, cartels and stuff like that. Now, nihilism, okay, is the belief that all institutions and values are meaningless, okay? So violence becomes an end, okay? So no matter what, it all leads to violence, okay? So this is like it kind of used historically through some anarchist movements, okay? There was a movement in Russia, your textbook likes to talk about, that discusses this, okay? Religion and political violence. This is something that we've seen a lot within the past year as well. And I think Charlie Kirk is a perfect example of a modern example of this. Okay, we had a guy going around expressing his freedom of speech. Okay, whether you liked it or not, it is what it is. In America, you should be able to express your freedom or express what you believe in, as long as you're not, back like pulling another whatever. Okay, you guys understand the First Amendment, but this man, for spreading his beliefs, and also because a lot of his beliefs were tied to religion, it ended up him losing his life. Okay, obviously this is not the only type of religious or political violence we see. We see mosques getting shot up and burnt down, and Christian and Catholic churches being attacked, and it happens. And I'm not saying it justifies violence, but people justify their violence through religion because religion is something that is tied so much to us. Okay, it is the reason why we see conflict right now on the West Bank and in Jerusalem. Okay, everyone is trying to claim land based off of religious background, and it is them justifying violence with one another, attacking one another, bombing each other. Once again, I'm not saying this is not something that all religion stems off of, but usually the religious radicals like to um, reference religion when trying to justify the violence that they're committing. Okay, now state responses. Okay, the best way that you can um, make sure that that terrorism does not exist or political violence does not exist is through surveillance and security. Okay. So like in response to 9/11, we see the 2001 and Patriot Act take place. Okay. Right now we have all these flock cameras getting put up. Okay. And we just try to collect as much intel as we can on outside sources of violence and then also internal sources of violence. Okay. But our government is always watching us. Couple whistleblowers up there. We have CIA whistleblower. I know I didn't put John Kiriakou up in the slides for you guys, but I just forgot I had him. I was going to talk about him anyways. You guys have probably seen him on your IG Reels or on TikTok, him talking about all the crazy tactics that the CIA has gone into. But he is an example of a whistleblower. Discusses what the CIA does to keep America safe. And then we have NSA whistleblower Edward Snowden, who actually gave us a really good example or told us some ways in which government actually spies on us, okay? Which used to be all conspiracies, by the way. Like, hey, they can track your movement through your Wi-Fi box. Turns out that's actually real. There's all these smart TVs all have a speaker that can be remotely activated, okay? Your phone is always listening to you. Your camera's always on, whether you have a piece of tape covering it or not, okay? They're listening to us all the time, okay? They've admitted to it. They had to admit, okay? We have these whistleblowers, okay? And you should thank them. And I'm not saying that it's not important. Obviously, we need our government to keep us safe. Should they be surveilling us 24/7? No, obviously they should surveil just criminals. But how do they know they're criminals? Okay, the camera always has to be on. Those Ring cameras that they showed at that Super Bowl commercial. Hey, we're gonna help you find your dog. They don't care about your dog like that. They want to know when you're leaving the house all the time. Okay, kind of like how they caught that Luigi kid. If you guys want to understand why that hasn't been that court case hasn't been solved yet. Okay, it is because they're going to have to admit that they use improper ways, improper evidence to actually catch him. If he committed the crime, he 100% got away with it. They have no legal way that they actually have any evidence to throw at him, and that's how our legal system works. So they have to find correct information to incriminate him. I don't believe they have that. I think they use improper tactics to actually catch him in the first place. And they'll have to admit to it if that is the route that they want to go. So, but regardless though, if you want to know how good our surveillance is, I'll give you guys a quick little story. I have a friend, a mutual friend that I had ended up making. Okay. He was in the Air Force. He speaks Farsi. So he was in, if you guys ever want to work in the Middle East, or if you guys ever want to work in the military, you want to get a really good job or one of these intelligence agencies, if you speak Russian, Mandarin, Farsi, front of the list. John Kiriakou, there's a video of him talking about it. It is true. So I have a friend, he's Hispanic actually, speaks Farsi, okay? He ends up becoming a linguist, sitting there all day with the headset on in Maryland, listening to these people all around the world. And it's funny because he would listen to these people, and they'd be in the middle of the desert in a cave, talking about, who they're meeting up with, what they're plotting, and they would make this joke. There was one time he said he was listening, and they post everything on a board, by the way. It's like their version of social media. They can go and see what other people have been listening to and writing down, reporting. They're like, hey, imagine if they're listening to us right now. And they're like, there's no way they can be listening to us right now. The whole time, my friend's laughing on the other side with the headset on in Maryland, listening to this conversation in the Middle East, in the middle of a cave. So if we have the ability to listen to people like that, it is probably not so far from us that they're not always listening to us all the time. Okay. I also think meta glasses have played a big role in this. I love the meta glass content video. It's funny. It is brain rot. It can be kind of annoying. But it is once again another example of our government, or private companies getting a view of what we're seeing on a day-to-day basis, and they're probably selling and sharing that information. These companies have done it before. They will always do it. Okay, there's always data breaches. So It's just something that we have to look out for. It sucks. Obviously, one side of it is that our privacy is being invaded, but the other side is that hopefully our government is using this type of information to keep us safe. It's the reason why hopefully ICE is around, because they're deporting criminals, not deporting people that are hardworking and that are contributing to our society. Okay. And here's just kind of types of democratic uh, focus on regime type and whether or not terrorism exists or not. Obviously, in an authoritarian government, you're going to have a lower risk from terrorism actually coming from domestic terrorism. International terrorism is actually more likely to happen here. In an illiberal or transitional type of regime, there is a higher risk of terrorism. Okay, and when it comes to democratic, you actually have a higher risk of domestic terrorism because people are allowed to do what? Express their opinion. Okay, and I got a really good email from one of you guys actually posing the question if voting should be seen as political violence. Okay, so here's some examples. Obviously, through American history, we go over here to the top left. We have Martin Luther King being his assassination. We have Abraham Lincoln up here in the top right, JFK in the bottom left, and then Donald Trump, one of the in the bottom right. All examples of political figures within our society. So there's a lot of examples that we can reference with political violence in America. Okay. And obviously there's a lot of conspiracies with almost every single one of these, but we don't have the time to cover that. Okay. This was an in-person class. I would definitely rant about that for probably a whole lecture period. But that concludes this chapter. Okay. I know we highlighted a lot of American examples of political violence. It takes place all over the world though. More likely to take place though, at least domestic terrorism in a democratic regime. In a non-democratic regime, you'll see a lot of these terrorist organizations pop up. Okay. Or within a weak state, terrorism is more likely to exist rather than a strong state. But that concludes it for chapter 7. I hope you guys are enjoying the class. I really love this topic. I know this video is 26 minutes long. I could make this video 2 hours long. Okay. Plus, I love talking about those conspiracies, and I like talking about how the government's always spying on us. So, let's hope that I'm not on the list, just like the history teacher on Mendota was. So, but you guys have a good rest of your day. I hope you guys are still enjoying the class, and I'll see you guys in the next video.